The English language is definitely a language of all time. It's fairly different from its relative languages, and over time has become kind of a hot pot of multiple languages. But what makes English so different from its relatives? In this video, I'm going to go over 10 ways the English language is unique. Before I begin, I want to state that when I say unique, I mean things that make English stick out in comparison to English's closest languages. Also, the things mentioned in this list are in no particular order. First up, at number 1, we have what is called do support. Do support in English grammar is essentially adding the auxiliary verb do when forming questions and sentences using not or negative declarations. For example, when forming questions, you don't usually ask someone, "Have you a pencil?" Instead, you usually ask, "Do you have a pencil?" You must add that do in there. Another example is for negative imperative statements, such as "do not enter here." If you wanted to make this sentence the opposite, you would say "enter here." However, it would not be "do enter here." Further examples of negation are sentences like "he does not like cats" versus "he likes cats," or "I didn't know that" versus "I knew that." The do has to be their negative sentence. You cannot say "he likes not cats" or "he not likes cats." When the sentence is not negative, however, the do is optional. Like if you wanted to place emphasis, you could use do in a sentence like "I did know that," but do has to be there if your sentence is negative. Now, there are more intricacies about do support, but just know these are the main facts about it. This particular use of an auxiliary verb is unusual in many European languages. Many European languages do not use the version of do in the situations I mentioned. At number 2 is the lack of grammatical gender. In the majority of major European languages, there's still a good amount of the use of grammatical gender, and while English retains very minimal grammatical gender, like in the English words he, she, queen, king, etc., the lack of gender for all nouns is unusual for a European language. Languages that English is derived from, like German and French, have genders for all nouns. These languages also have what is called gender agreement, which is when parts of a sentence such as adjectives, articles, or verbs in some cases, need to agree with the gender of the noun. Like in French, adjectives take on a different ending depending on if a noun is masculine or feminine. For example,
la grosse chienne.
The article and adjective agree with the noun, which is feminine. This grammatical gender and agreement is basically entirely absent in English. Number 3, and this is related to number 2, is the lack of number agreement in English. By explaining what this means, I will give an example. In Spanish, to say the 3 fat cats, you would say los tres gatos gordos. In this sentence in Spanish, the noun gatos is plural, the article los is plural, and the adjective gordos is plural too. All parts of the sentence are agreeing with the number of the noun. This number agreement is seen throughout a good amount of European languages. English, however, like with gender agreement, just lacks this number agreement in most instances. Coming up at number 4 is English's very irregular spelling. This is definitely something unique and very well known about English. Its history of irregular spelling goes back pretty far. With the lack of proper reforms that many modern European languages have gone through, English has become a language with one of, if not the most, irregular spelling systems of all major European languages. Especially with words ending in OUGH, it is nearly impossible to know how to pronounce an English word just by reading it. Words that should rhyme just don't. The mass use of silent letters, some letters and words being pronounced in multiple different ways, and a multitude of exceptions make English spelling a nightmare. While having such a counterintuitive spelling system, it definitely makes English unique in that regard, as many European languages have relatively normal and phonetic spelling. Even French, with its silent letters galore, has regular spelling rules, and you could definitely pronounce a word how it looks if you know the rules. I mean, at least this terrible spelling system could lead to games like the spelling bee existing, which is a plus, I guess. At number 5, which kind of connects to number 4, is English takes spelling from different languages. Part of the reason English has such irregular spelling is because English simply takes a word from a different language, but doesn't change the spelling to English spelling conventions, if you could even say there are conventions. English uses what is called etymological orthography, which is when words are spelled based on the principle of keeping the traditional spelling of words from their language. So this leads to words like cello, borrowed from Italian, still being spelled with just a C, even though it should be spelled with CH in English. Other words like psychology or bourgeoisie are more that adds this confusion of English spelling. Many other languages might take these words, but design them so they fit their language's spelling rules. English doesn't do this, and when we loan words, we take them in their full beauty. In a way, by not ruining the word's origin and changing the spelling, English is being kind to the word and its background. However, this just makes the spelling that much more confusing. At number 6, English has no diacritics or accent markers. If English had accent markers, I bet it'd be much easier to read and write English. But alas, we do not. English has retained very minimal accent markers, like in cafe or other loanwords like resume or piñata. They are primarily found in loanwords, but some words like cooperation can be found with an umlaut spelling to avoid people pronouncing it as cooperation. Even with these examples, these words could still simply be written without the accent marker and still be correct. There are many factors as to why English doesn't have accent markers, but it's strange that English lacks them because so many of its relatives use them all the time. Moving on to number 7, there is no formal version of the word you. Or if I wanted to be technical about it, there is no informal version of the word you, as the now archaic thou was actually the informal version. But over time, thou and its other forms, thee, thy, and thine, fell out of use and favored the formal version you. But nowadays, since everyone just uses you, it has lost its former glory of formal status. In many other European languages, they still retain the distinction of a formal and informal you. In German, there's
Du,
versus.
sie.
In French,
Tu,
versus.
vous.
In Dutch,
Jij,
versus.
u.
And the list goes on. Additionally, in these languages, there is also a plural version of you, which English lacks. However, some English dialects contain a plural you, such as yous and y'all, but these are typically used in certain regions. Number 8, most speakers of English are not native speakers. There are around 1.3 billion speakers of English, however, only around 400 million are native speakers. That's around 70% of speakers learning English as a second language. This definitely has to do with England conquering numerous countries around the world, spreading the language with them, the rise of the internet, and the United States becoming such a prevalent superpower in the last several decades being major factors. In much of the major European languages, and really the world's languages as a whole, not many other languages have had this large global status while having most of its speakers not being native. Even with Mandarin Chinese and Spanish, though having such a large amount of speakers, most of them are native speakers. At number 9, the English language lacks a central authority. Many languages have a central authority that govern how a language works, with its spelling, grammar, pronunciation, and so on. Spanish has the Royal Academy of Spanish, French has the Académie Française, German has the Council for German Orthography. The list can go on and on. English does not have this regulating authority for the language. The closest thing is the Oxford Dictionary, but it's definitely not the same thing. I mean, at this point, English is kind of too far gone to have a central authority, and there are so many different dialects and ways of speaking that frankly, it would be impossible to have one central authority to regulate the language. Perhaps different authorities for major regions, but even then it would still be a mess. Not having one of these regulators makes English a very flexible language and one that is unique. Lastly, at number 10, the capitalization of the word I. This rule is probably the most regular and unique rule to exist in the English language. It's a simple rule. When writing the first person singular pronoun I, it must always be capitalized. This is not found in essentially all major European languages. Even though some languages like German, which capitalize some pronouns in all of their nouns, German still doesn't capitalize the first person pronoun. This rule is truly unique to the English language. And those are 10 ways that the English language is unique. If there's something I should have included or something I got wrong, let me know. I might do a part 2 of this, but I definitely want to try to do lists on other languages someday. If you have any ideas for a future video, also let me know. That's all for today. Hope you enjoyed.